every standard. I'm not normal because our society is not a normal society. If you have traversed across the African continent, you would know that this continent is great, with great people, with good hearts, but then with bad leadership. I'll tell you a couple of stories because I'm a storyteller. And let's start with the Nigerian story. In 2014, 9.2 billion was approved by the Federal Executive Council to procure 750,000 clean cook stoves and 18,000 wonder bags to be distributed free of charge to rural women across the country. At that time, a lot of young people were not happy, and they tried to bring down social media and say that there's high level of unemployment, so why would government invest 9.2 billion? And also there was no much information on what this money would deliver on and who would deliver in this expenditure. Because I am not normal, I got on a bus to Sokoto. And just to put this into context, I am not from Sokoto, I am not from northern Nigeria, neither am I from the south, east, or west. I am Nigeria. I got to Sokoto and I visited a couple of rural communities. And the simple thing I did was ask women, did you know about this 9.2 billion? And the answer was no. Would you like to have a clean cook stove? The answer was yes. I came back to Abuja and I went to Ekiti. I went to Ekiti because I was not a normal person. And I did the same thing in Ekiti, talking to rural women, asking about if they were aware about the stove. Then I came back to Abuja after visiting a couple of states across the 6 geopolitical zone. And I remember writing a letter to the Executive Minister of Environment, asking her, how would you utilize this money? But she did not respond. I reached out to other civil society leaders. I reached out to the media. And I convened a meeting. And my meeting was very simple. I invited the Ecological Fund Office because that was where the money was supposed to come from. I invited officials from the Ministry of Environment and of course the Ministry of Finance. I invited the private sector because they were meant to procure this clean cook stove. But then in this meeting, more questions arose rather than answers. The Ecological Fund Office was not aware that 9.2 billion would come from their office, which was quite strange. But then the company who got this contract confirmed at first that they had not received any money. Weeks later, they got back to us and said they got 1.3 billion as 15% of the actual funds to procure these stoves. But that was where we got to understand the difference between approval, release, and utilization. But most importantly, when money is involved and where they get this money, information would stop coming. But to try to cut this very long story short, on this fateful day, I received a phone call inviting me for a meeting. And as someone who is not normal, I always go to meetings with another person who is not normal like me. So we got into this meeting, and I was told, you were supposed to come alone, so why are you here with someone else? So, well, I needed a company. They tried to get the other person to leave the room, but I insisted that I needed a witness. The first time in my life, 100 million naira in cash was brought out in front of me in Ghana, Moscow. And I was told that I need to become a normal person and keep quiet. I smiled and I acted it. And I said, well, I did not drive here. Can you give me a minute? Let me go and bring a car so that I can come and take this plenty gift and leave and become a normal person. They became happy and said, yes, sure, why not? Please go. But then I left this meeting very angry. I was so angry at myself. I was angry about the society and the people who are supposed to manage our collective wealth. But as a person who is not normal, when I go to these meetings, I always have my recorders on. So I had evidence that I was offered bribe to keep quiet. But then again, I went public and told the world that the 9.2 billion would not deliver on its promises. The next day, there was a media briefing by the executive minister showing the world that stoves have been procured. But you know, interestingly, the beauty of information and the power of evidence is those stoves that was showed to the world was brought back from Kara Namuda, which is a local community in Zamfara State. This stove was budgeted under the 2013 appropriation, procured and supplied to this community, but was collected back and brought back to Abuja to cover up for the 9.2 billion. Weeks later, they brought together very important personalities at the villa. They wanted to launch the 9.2 billion project and show the world that they've actually procured the stove. But I didn't get invited, even if they knew that I was an important stakeholder. My phone rang again, and someone was calling me anonymously, saying, Hamzat, a meeting is about to happen to launch a stove that was not procured. We want you to come and witness this proceeding. And luckily for me, I was wearing my cap that day, like this. So I went to the villa. So I went into the hall in the villa, and all the dignitaries were there. And someone whispered to the Minister of Environment that follow the monies here, because that's what they popularly called me. She got very angry and she was asking her directors, how did this young man got to know that we're launching the stoves today? Because it was not in the public domain. Well, along the line, she walked up to me. So she walked up to me and she started yelling at me inside the villa, saying things that I cannot repeat here. But by the grace of God, I was calm. And I did not respond. In no time, we were surrounded by military men with uniform. And they were all shocked because they could identify with the minister, but they don't know who I was. But I was really calm and just listening to her yelling at me in public. In no time, she was uprooted and taken to her convoy to leave. And I remember the words of that general. He came at me and he said, young man, I don't know who you are, but I'm really sorry for what just happened. This is an embarrassment to our country. Please continue your business. In 2015, the world leaders met in Poland. At that time, I was the only Nigerian youth that got a visa to attend this world meeting with heads of state and heads of government as a civil society voice. At this meeting, I was a voice not just to Nigerian youths, but African youths at large. A breakfast meeting was put together by the president of Poland, and they needed 2 youth representatives to speak on behalf of the world youth. My name was put forward, and I got a clearance pass for the next day. I'm sharing this story with you because as much as we're not normal people, we always need to be ready and prepared for every situation. Few minutes after I got my pass and clearance, 5 young people from Europe came to me and said, Hamzat, would like to have a meeting with you. I said, oh, that's fine. So they took me to one corner and told me that, Hamzat, we don't think that you have what it takes to represent the world youth at this breakfast meeting. We think that because you're from Africa, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the capacity and the experience to speak on our behalf. We want you right now to give us that pass and send an email saying you're unable to go for that meeting. But as a young man who is not normal, I looked at them and I thanked them first. Because in international diplomacy, you must always say thank you. I said, thank you so much. I was not expecting this, but I think you have a point. But then I paused and I took them back to where I was coming from. I shared with them what happens in my rural communities. And I asked them if they have ever experienced the devastation of climate change. If they have ever experienced losing family members just because drainages were not put in place. I shocked them with data and information and showed them pictures on my phone. And they lost words. They left apologizing. In 2010, there was lead poisoning outbreak in Zamfara State. At that time, it was declared as one of the worst ever crises in the world. But then we had a lot of emergency response. Millions of dollars from the World Bank, from UNICEF. Billions of naira from federal government. And there was a coordinated effort. But then in 2012, I was struggling to find out what has happened in the past 2 years in this community. I struggled to lay hands on information, but most media houses only have the basic knowledge and press releases issued. So I entered a bus going to Gusau. And just to put this into context, from Abuja to Gusau is 7 hours by road. But that was not my destination. And before that time, I didn't know anyone in Gusau. From Gusau to Anka is 3.5 hours. And from Anka to my destination, which is Bagega, was 4 hours. And to go to Bagega at that time, there are only 3 ways you can go. The first way is to go with the MSF humanitarian truck, that's Doctors Without Borders, or you go with a camel, or you go with a motorbike. But then I went to the motorbike. I got to Bagega community, and I experienced firsthand sufferings I have never seen before. I saw children that are convulsing, children that, and parents that don't know their fate. I took my mobile phone and documented these proceedings, taking pictures and doing interviews. I came back to Abuja and I had so much knowledge and so much information, and I felt like my head would explode. But then I needed people who were not normal to join me and amplify the voices of these people. I remember hosting a couple of my friends, telling them about this experience and journey. And just to tell you that because we have amazing young people with skills, with passion, we shared roles and responsibilities and started a hashtag called Save Bagega. In less than 24 hours, we were able to get all the content I had gathered from this community, and it was trending on social media. For a while, no one talked about politics, no one talked about religion, no one talked about ethnicity, but they were all talking about Save Bagega, because they could put faces of people from their communities. They could relate with those pictures and videos of the devastated effects of lead poisoning and irregular mining activities. I got an email from the Human Rights Watch saying, Hamzat, we've followed your campaign with Follow the Money, and we think we can help you amplify this campaign on Facebook. So we agreed to issue a joint press release and amplify the campaign on Facebook. And that time, what we did was to move the traffic from Twitter and Facebook to President Goodluck Jonathan's Facebook page and asking global citizens to post information saying he needed to release funds for the cleanup and healthcare emergency. And at that time, what was needed was $5.2 million. Well, in less than 48 hours, he addressed the World Press Conference and approved this money. Today, because we did things that were not normal, for you to go to Bagega community, it takes less than 30 minutes from Anka. For you to travel between Anka and Gusau, it takes less than 20 minutes. Because in our campaign, we were documenting and taking selfies so the world would see behind us there are bad roads. But what has happened and what has changed? And how did we mobilize people that are not normal to fit into a society that is not normal? We became a movement of young people that are tech savvy. But I would like to share a peculiar story. There's a young lady called Zeliha Abdullahi. She was our campaign assistant in Kaduna State. And there was this particular situation where we usually hold town hall meetings. And we told Zeliha to go and lead this meeting. I remember that fateful day. Zeliha called and said, at this meeting there is no woman. There are older men, teachers, parents, but there is no single mother. And I told her, you have to go into that meeting and represent the voices of women. Because as people that are not normal, we must ensure that every voice is represented on the table. Zeliha didn't just go into this meeting, but she chaired the meeting, facilitated the session, and got feedback from all these men. As we strive into greatness, I want to leave you with one word. For us to get it right, we must understand that there is a thin fine line between activism and politics. And for us to get it right, we must remain abnormal. Because if we are normal, then we would not move forward. Thank you.